Hello, a big welcome to everyone, and thanks for joining us at today's In Conversation with Gina Martin. My name's Nerissa. I'm an iwill ambassador, and I'm host for today's conversation. This is part of iwill Week, an annual celebration of youth social action across the UK. As with the iwill movement, we are building a society that understands and champions the power of youth, where all young people are equipped and enabled to shape and lead change in their own lives and wider communities. Today's conversation is just one of the many events that we've put together for this iwill Week, so make sure to visit www.iwill.org.uk to see the full listing of the events and activities and all those extra resources. Joining us today, we have Gina Martin, who founded and ran the campaign to make upskirting illegal in the UK after her experience in 2017 being a victim of upskirting whilst at a festival. She had little help from security, who were unable to do anything, and then followed up by reaching out to the police, who also couldn't do anything as the act was not a criminal offence at the time. Gina sought to raise awareness through social media of what the men looked like and soon found her post banned. After feeling let down by these separate bodies, she realised this gap in the law was leaving women and girls helpless in these situations. She decided to take action to end this form of sexual harassment by creating a social media campaign to make this behaviour a criminal offence in the UK. This then became a legal case, making it all the way to Parliament, and it was eventually passed into law. To date, 3 more countries have since followed suit. Gina has subsequently written a book about her incredible success in combating such a neglected area of the law. The book is called Be the Change, a toolkit for the activist in you, taking readers through a step-by-step process of running a campaign. So welcome, Gina, and thank you so much for having a conversation with me today. I think it's going to be a really exciting chat for the iwill viewers to have a listen to. And I just want to start by asking, how did it feel for you to address an issue that affects women, young women and girls across the country? And how did you mentally prepare to take on a task of this size? Because it's huge.
Well, firstly, thank you for having me. And also, what an intro. That was so dead on. All the details are correct. It was so good. Taking on an issue like that was quite big is obviously a pretty daunting thing. But I think I did what a lot of activists do before they even would call themselves activists, where you don't really understand what you're taking on at the very beginning. Most of the organisers and advocates and activists that I know and people who work in social change, like regardless of what you want to call yourself, they start because they just can't not do something about something, whether that's like creating a community garden or volunteering in their community, or that's 12-year-old I know who's trying to stop battery eggs being in their corner shop, or that's trying to change the law. You do it because you're like, oh, I really want this to happen, or I really think this is wrong, or I really want something to be available to me, people like me, that isn't. And you start getting a bit scrappy and trying to figure out how you can start it. And I think it's very rare that at that point you're like, I'm going to change. I wasn't like, I'm changing the law. I wouldn't have been able to say that out loud, because I would have thought, who am I? Why do I think I can do that? Because I had no political or legal experience, and I wasn't particularly academic in school. So it was only until about 6 months in, about 8 months in maybe, of work every single day, that I was like, oh, I think we have to go really hard here, and we have to try and change the law. And I'm just terrified of doing that. But I think that's where this is going. It's naturally building to a point where it needs to be that big now. And there's so many people with stories coming to me, like you say, young women, girls, women, trans women, people just contacting me and being like, this has happened to me, thousands and thousands of people. So that becomes way bigger than you, right? And then you have to get involved and try and be part of it for everyone. So it was only when I realized how big it was going to be and that I was going to try and do this thing, I actually don't think that I engaged with it that much in terms of the idea that that's what I was doing. I was like, yeah, we're going to try and change the law. But if I'd sat in bed and thought about what that might take and how long that might take, because we changed the law in about 2 years, but me and my lawyer Ryan, there was a lot of conversations where he had to kind of set my expectations and be like, this could take 5-10 years. People campaign for 15 years for these things, 20 years, and it's not going to happen quickly. And so when you really start to think about the thing you're trying to change or the thing you're trying to do, it can get quite overwhelming. I know a lot of activists feel like that because the things that we're up against are big structural things that are really scary. So you have to take, it's so cliche and it's so trite, but it's cliche because it's true. You have to take it one day at a time. You have to take it one strategy at a time. Okay, right now I'm just trying to get in touch with the minister, and if I can get the minister on email, I can meet with the minister, then that's it, and then we'll go to the next bit. So it was daunting, but it also felt manageable somehow because we focused on just what we were doing at that point and what was next.
I think taking it one step at a time and breaking it into smaller chunks is cliche, but I think it's advice that applies to anything, not just if you're trying to do social change to change the law, but it's a different issue in your community or something that's close to you. I think I always start by breaking things down into chunks, making loads of lists, post-it notes, and just trying to see, okay, well, today, if we do that, and then that's accomplished, and then you can just keep moving on to the next step. Here it is, and it becomes more overwhelming when it's just one massive thing, and you see it and you think, I can't do that. But if you break it down, everything a little bit easier.
Totally agree.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I've got a quote here from your TED Talk, which I think resonates really well with this series that we're doing. So social media is the single most democratizing is the word, tool we've ever had for social change. It can be harnessed for good anytime. And I think I wanted to bring it up today because we hear a lot of the negative things about social media, especially at the minute. All our anxieties, insecurities, all of that can sometimes be heightened because of the social media and how much we're using it in this day and age. But you've used it and harnessed it for this issue and used it for good. So if you want to talk a bit about that and explain how you made your messages get seen by everyone, how you made it resonate and be captivating for people to use social media and your social media to learn.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad you brought it up because I think our issue, the tools we have in our arsenal to change things, like the things that we can use, actually nothing is inherently harmful or unharmful, right? Like social media is a tool, and it's a vehicle, it's a thing that we can use, whether that's for social change or that's just personally something in our lives, whether it's for networking, whatever, finding relationships, friendships, whatever. And it can be used both ways. So I think often we talk about social media as if it's innately harmful. I don't think it is innately harmful. Everything, I think it's when TV came out, everyone was like, oh, you're going to get square eyes and it's innately harmful. We do that with everything. We're very binary. Everything's good or bad. And the reality is that social media can be weaponized for harm as easily as it can be weaponized for good and progress. Or not weaponized, but harnessed for good and progress. So I worked in advertising before I started campaigning. I was an art director copywriter, and if for anyone who doesn't know about the ad world, what that means is that you come up with the ideas for adverts, so billboards or TV or social media, and one person does the pictures and one person does the copy. And I was an art director at the time. And part of campaigns that I was working on were big alcohol brands, so Jack Daniels and all big alcohol whiskey brands and stuff. And I would do social media ads and marketing as part of that. And I worked with an amazing social marketing team in my agency, so I got a really good insight into what it takes to spread messages. And advertising is quite a lot about making people buy things they don't need, right? So to do that, you have to be able to convince them that you need this whiskey in your life and it's going to make you so much happier, and it's capitalism, and it's the reason I left. But when I was working full-time throughout the whole campaign in advertising, 9 to 5, while I was running this legal case and in the government and stuff. So it was really interesting because I don't think I put it together at the time. It was only afterwards that I realized, oh wow, I was literally doing marketing but for an issue. So all the things I would do for whiskey on social media, come up with kind of simplified, snappy language to make them understand the issue, use really arresting visuals. I did a photo shoot with people who had experienced upskirting with a photographer called Eliza Hatch, who takes people back to where they've experienced sexual harassment or assault to help them reclaim the space. And I told their stories and she's photographed them. And so I was doing all this stuff that was very much marketing, effectively using these kind of capitalist tools that we usually use for profit, but I was kind of taking them and using them for social good. And it was wild how similar it was to advertising. So I would do things I had a petition, I put a bit of money behind it, and I would like craft like social posts that were like, you know, a question up front, like, why isn't upskirting a sexual offence, question mark, or like, why is it okay for someone to take photos of your crotch in a public place? And it's like, what? You know, like, it was very much like clickbaity stuff of what we're doing now, but very grounded in fact. And so I created this kind of social media strategy around this question of why is it not a sexual offence, and then employed a lot of the skills I had in marketing to do that. And what was at the base of that, which I think is the reason why, because our society is very individualistic. So like everything's about like you, and like you go find your thing and you be the best, and you you know, boss it and like win and like all this stuff. And what I love about activism and campaigning and organizing is that it's about the collective, and there's very few things that are like that anymore. And social media is built on this idea of like winning and individualism with the numbers and the followers and stuff. But it's really interesting because it's actually an incredible tool for the collective. It's an amazing organizing tool, because in the same way that in like the 60s in America, you had housewives calling across states to organize boycotts of you know, meat shops because of the price of rising meat, and they couldn't afford to feed their families. And that was housewives organizing who had very little rights at that time. They were calling each other across different states and organizing. It would take them 4 hours to get across to 20 people. Now you can get online and you can have 100 people engaged in a couple of days. And I don't think any of us really realize the power we have. Like if you had 100 people in a theatre in seats and you were on stage and those 100 people were sitting there with bated breath waiting to hear what you had to say, you'd be like, I can't, this is so scary. Oh my God, I can't believe they want to hear what I have to say. But if you have 100 followers, you're like, oh, it's nothing. I've got no one's listening. I've got no followers. It's like, that's 100 people who are interested in what you're saying. So I think harnessing that and realizing that you have an immediate sphere of influence and you can organize across social media, you can make real connections with people. There's always people who are going through what you're going through. You know, if you want to tell your story, like the amount of things we've seen pop up, everyone's invited, like so many different amazing platforms on there. And it's not, although it's obviously there's a lot of issues with kind of who it's owned by and Facebook and Meta and Mark Zuckerberg and all that, but the day-to-day of it is that you can find people who care about the same things you do, and you can organize things in a way that we just couldn't before. So I would really encourage us to like continue to be able to see the hope and the positivity and the use of social media as a tool for organizing, and really harness that as much as we possibly can, because it's right there and it's free. So anyone who has a phone or a laptop can organize and advocate and be an activist, and that just wasn't the case before.
Yeah, I think that's some really, really good advice. And even for if you're kind of just starting your social action journey and you think, well, you know, this is a big issue, I want to raise awareness to my message, and you don't know, how am I going to start? I don't have the funds, I don't have the following, I don't have the team of people around me to help me do this. You probably have access to a smartphone or a computer, or know someone that does, and you can get posting and you can start raising a bit of awareness and get it going from that, and just build it from something as simple as a social media post, and it can, you know, spiral. That's make something big.
That's how activism works, right? Like, I think everyone thinks they have to go in and do this huge impressive thing at the beginning. Like, that's not how it works. Like, you start small, it's like a muscle. And you actually have to build confidence in yourself too. Like, we all struggle with confidence. So like, even you don't even have to be the one that posts. Like, you can go in and like you can search like on Twitter, which is the best tool. Like, Twitter is, I literally ran my campaign on Twitter by like finding journalists, like finding politicians and like all this stuff. You can put in like your area and then like some keywords, and you can find places to volunteer, people to join, like action groups, direct action stuff. Like you can get involved with them first, so you're like with the people, and then when you feel confident enough to do something yourself, great. But I think it's a really good point that people need to realize it's not about you being like, okay, what can I speak on, and like what can I teach people? Like, you're just as valuable in a movement joining in one that's already created, as you are starting a new one, because there's so many thousands of people out there wanting someone to take this role. Like, we're doing direct action and protesting, and you're like, oh, well, I'm a bit nervous about protesting. Okay, fine. Protesters need to eat. Are you a great baker? Can you make tea? Are you great at crafts? Can you make the signs? Like, there's a role for every single person, and starting small is definitely the key.
I think, yeah, that's great. I mean, with my social action as well, I work at a community garden, and the group of people that I work with, we all do it together because we all have those different skills. So rather than it being just about me, this is my message and I'm gonna share it by doing protesting, we'll all work together and use those different attributes and skills, what we're good at, put that together, and then that itself is the social action as a team. Exactly. So you don't have to just think, oh, I have to do it on my own. There's always other people that will be willing to join in and get a team together and just go at it as a group as well. It's a really good place to start. So another question, what was your biggest learning moment or takeaway from this?
Wow, biggest. There's so many because I literally
yeah.
I think I actually changed like as a person. I think my like DNA changed during this experience because it was like the hardest. I've actually only really just got, so it finished in 2009. Well, it never really finished. Like I work on it all the time and I was in, you know, the CPS, Crown Prosecution Service and Ministry of Justice like 2 days ago. It never really finishes, but I guess the public facing thing of like, she's done it, she's changed the law, which is the simplified version of it, finished in like April 2019. And I've kind of only just got to the point where I can talk about like the day-to-day of what that experience was without crying, because it was so hard. Like it was exhausting and tiring and I got so much abuse from it. And it was just a real personal sacrifice to do it. And there's so many lessons from it, but I think there's one thing that I come back to often. It's very abstract and it's very general, but the reality is that people are using the system every day and exploiting the system for nefarious or bad purposes, to hurt people for personal gain, for personal profit every single day, all day, every day, all night around the world. People in power. And I really believe that people who want to change society for the better need to be doing that as much for the good. So the ways in which you do it might be different because you tread a more moral path, because on this side of the mirror, we're all trying to like do the right thing, right? And like make the world a better place and make it fairer and make people's lives easier. So we're hesitant to play the game a bit because we've seen so many people play the game in a way that is harmful. Politicians, billionaires, CEOs, blah, blah, blah. But you really, when we were in Parliament, like me and Ryan were playing a game in the same way that the politicians were. And I think that's probably what helped us finish the job. So simple things like when we were meeting with MPs, we didn't really tell MPs who we were meeting with because we needed cross-party support from every single party, because then it doesn't become like a Conservative issue or a Labour issue, because if it becomes a party issue, they just kind of use it as leverage with each other and it never really gets through. So we'd kind of meet with someone and then we wouldn't tell the other person we were meeting with them, and then we'd be like, oh no, and then we'd meet with Labour and then we'd like have like hundreds of MPs like on side, but I don't think a lot of them knew how much we'd been in there and who we'd been meeting with. They obviously talked to each other, so there was a bit of information happening, but we were withholding as much information as we were giving out slowly to them. And the way that I use social media, and you know, there was a bunch of kind of sneaky things we did to get the job done. And I think so often when you're someone who's quite moral, you can be like, can't be sneaky, but as long as you're sneaky and you're not harming people in the process, the reality is people are weaponizing that power every day for bad. So I think you have to harness and be creative, think outside the box. You know, you can't politely ask a system that's harming people to stop harming people. Mm-hmm. It's not going to work. So, and we've seen a lot of that with direct action in the UK recently, this, you know, Inside Britain and all this kind of stuff, which is the system continually trying to stop people because, well, can't you do it in a nice way? Well, the nice way's never worked. People have been doing that for decades and it doesn't work. It doesn't apply the pressure. It doesn't create an unsustainable environment for people in power where they have to make a decision. Asking politely doesn't do that. And we know it's working because of like the police crime courts and sentencing bill. Like the government is trying to crack down on protests because they're working and they're getting nervous about how much they're working. So don't be afraid to play the game a bit to get things done. Don't be afraid to play the system a bit. Know where your boundaries are, what you will and won't do, and what's harmful and what's not harmful. Don't be harmful to people ever, but don't feel, you know, be a politician in the best way. You know, if people are going to do it for bad, do it for good. Because they're doing it every day, and we need more of us to be taking risks for the good.
Yeah, no, really, really good advice. And I think your biggest moment when you've answered that question is not something that I think I was expecting you to say, because sometimes you kind of think, oh, I've I've grown so much as a person, or like this has happened, but actually be sneaky but not in a harmful way, I think is a really interesting and unique point. I like that
sneaky.
one.
I'm like a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
Sneaky.
And you spoke a bit about Ryan, so the lawyer who helped you and amplified your campaign and led you to meet with MPs, and in the end, in turning your campaign becoming a bill. And you've illustrated that this took time to meet with individual MPs, inform them about this matter, and you've stated why it is important that they back you in this campaign. So some advice for the iwill ambassadors on champions on how they can seek that legal and political support from people like MPs, councillors, lawyers in supporting them in their own campaigns that they're fighting for. And I think one that's important that I'd like to know as well, if they're looking for advice, how can they be taken seriously, especially when you think, you know, you're young, you haven't got a lot of support behind you, who's going to listen to me, and why should someone take me serious?
It's a really good question. I think, well, firstly, if people don't take it seriously and your work's good, then that's their issue. Because I feel like so many people underestimate young people. Like, we always talk about young people like, they're our future, they're our leaders of tomorrow. And I'm like, they're your leaders now. Like, watch the news. Like, most of the global movements that are happening, like the climate movement as a basic example, but there's so many movements happening from young people and adults who are so obsessed with process and so obsessed with the system and how they should act and how they should can learn so much from young people. But I think I can only really speak from my own experience, but I think a really good way of a couple of questions in there. So the first thing I would say is getting people to take you seriously. You just have to show, depending on what your aim is and your objective is, you just have to show that you have enough. You can't. So when I'm so bad answering multiple questions. Okay, so when I started to change the law, I couldn't go into a law firm and be like, I'm going to change the law. Just believe me, please, because that's not evidence, right? But I had to demonstrate like some of the traits that would get me there. So I had to demonstrate that I was really determined. I had to demonstrate that I knew the issue inside out. I had to demonstrate that I was really savvy with the media and I was really good at raising an issue simply in a way lots of people could understand. Demonstrating those kind of qualities or the work up front allows people to be able to imagine the fact that, oh, actually, if someone's going to do it, it's probably this kid's going to do it, because they're not stopping. Like, they literally won't stop. Or the hours they're putting in, or the people they've got involved. And those people don't even have to be powerful. If they can be, you know, Joe from Rotherham, but hundreds of them, like, it, you know. So what I did is I did like the social media campaign, and then I called like, well, emailed producers and stuff from like traditional TV and like morning shows and stuff with all the numbers from the social media campaign, because obviously social allows you to go 5,000 people have engaged with this, or 50,000 people have seen this, because it gives you the analytics. So I packaged all those up and then got in touch with producers for traditional TV and media and did a lot of that. And by the time I'd done that, so I was doing the social media, then the traditional media, and then whenever, you know, the traditional media like TV would post a cut down of an interview I did this morning on Twitter, I'd be right there in the comment section, getting everyone who's watched it to sign the petition and circling back and getting these actions taken. So by the time I went to law firms, which I didn't know what I was doing at all when I was at this point, I just kind of was getting in touch with law firms like, hello, I'd like to change the law, please. And I think it's really important. But I'd got enough, I put enough in the bucket up front. So I had like a law student who was a good friend of mine who'd written like a page of information on the gap in the law in a way that I could understand, because I can't understand bills really the way they're written. I can't really understand legalese and law. It's like Harry Potter, it doesn't make sense, the words. So I got like someone to translate that for me in a way that I understood, so I really could talk about it easily. Because when you read academic language, I find often it's hard to retain, and then when you try and speak about it, you're like, I can't remember all the words, and you get like, I do anyway, I get overwhelmed by the language, so I can't I can't regurgitate it in conversation easily. Yeah. So to get things written down in a really easily understandable way for me was really important. So I had that. So I basically went to the law firm and said, look at all this media work I've done. There are this many people interested. The public care about this. Look at the research I've done. This shows you simply that there's a gap in the law. Here's what my plan is and what I want to do. And I'm looking for a law, I don't have any money, so I'm looking for a law firm to represent me pro bono, which lots of law firms have pro bono sections where people who just care about stuff will do work for free. And they have a kind of pot of money, because law firms have so much money, they have a kind of pot of money so that they can allow the lawyers and litigators to put hours in like that for free for people. And then eventually Ryan came into my life, slid into my DMs and said, like, what can I help you with? This is amazing, whatever you need me to do. But he was very collaborative. He was like, this is your thing, you've experienced this, you know more about it than me, I'm going to lend my skills to you. He wasn't like, I'm going to take this off you and be the guy that changes the law, whereas other lawyers have been like that. So if you think about the strategy there, which was the strategy throughout our entire campaign, was front load the work. So don't go to people and say, I have this thing and all I have are ideas and feelings about it. Have something to take to them that makes them go, oh, hang on, I can see that this person is really serious because they've already put the work in. They've made this easier for me. I can see that she's already started a media campaign. The public care about it. So instantly the law firm are like, well, it's in the public's interest for us to take this case. I can see that she knows her stuff. I'm not sitting there and talking about upskirting a bit, kind of know about it and kind of getting things wrong in conversations so they know I've really done my research. And then she's got a plan going forward. So she knows what she wants to achieve. She's smart enough to say, I don't think I can do that on my own because I don't understand law. So this is the bit you need to do. And then we did that when we went to Parliament. Even when me and Ryan had been working together for 6 months, we didn't go into Parliament and say, like, the law needs to change. Can you change it? Because they have a lot on in there and it was in the middle of Brexit. We went up and down the country and talked to all the biggest legal authorities and wrote the new legislation and got all the legal authorities to corroborate it and agree with it, which meant when we went into Parliament, we were going, you would have done this anyway, and we've done it for you. You just need to sign this piece of paper and agree with it. So like, do the work, do as much work as you can for them, and then they'll really struggle to not take you seriously because just the gumption of doing it, they'll be impressed and they'll be like, this kid won't stop. Like, this kid wants this. But secondly, you're going to make it way easier for them to sign on the dotted line and say, yeah, totally get involved. And then the final thing, because my answers are way too long always, is that to get pro bono representation, like if you want to get a lawyer or you don't have any money, who does have enough money to retain a lawyer? Like literally no one normal. If you want to go to councils and get a counsellor, if you want to talk to an MP, I think there are the official processes. So like everyone should know who their MP is. Like you should know who your MP is. Your MP works for you. Wherever you live, you have an MP and they work for you. And it doesn't feel like they do, but they do. So make them work for you. If you care about something in your area, get in touch with them. If they don't reply, email 5 more times. Like that's their job. So start with your MP, but also just don't be afraid to go outside the process. So like Ryan's a lawyer. Loads of MPs used to be lawyers. There's a very, very close link between the law and politics because they're very intricately connected. So finding contacts and like just networking through law, Ryan was like, oh, there's a guy I went to school with who I think is in Parliament now. I think he's a parliamentarian or he's a civil servant or something. We'll just get in touch with him and like meet for a coffee. And a lot of stuff in activism and organising works like that. It's not official. It's a lot of the time people meeting up for lunch and just having ideas and be like, okay, shall we do this? Or can you get us in one day? Who can we meet with? Who's a new MP who would need to be seen to be meeting with stuff on women's issues after Me Too? Because that's changed the game and MPs now need to be seen to be caring about it. Who could we meet that would be in that bracket? Just like talking to anyone you can. And I would say often that's a really valuable thing because going through the processes, there are hundreds of, or thousands of people trying to get in touch with MPs through just emailing them. So try and circumvent that. Do you know anyone in a law school who has a connection to a politician? Do you know anyone who's a law student who can help you into a law firm, who's interned somewhere, who can give you an email address? Go on LinkedIn. Everyone who works in any job is on LinkedIn. So you can find out where anyone works by using Twitter and LinkedIn. Just like I was saying before, be creative with it and don't be afraid to go outside the processes.
Yeah. And I think if you do all of those things that you've said, then people should definitely take you seriously no matter what your age is, because there's no reason that your age should be a factor in whether you're taken seriously or not. If you're putting that groundwork in, that research in and showing that determination, it shouldn't be, an issue at all.
No.
And yeah, so you've obviously been so busy doing all this, but have you got plans to tackle any more gaps in the law, and what do you see yourself doing in the next 5 years? Have you got any more ideas for more campaigns?
Do you know what? I don't think when I finished the law change, the number one question that I got asked was what's next, which is very normal, but I felt a huge pressure to like instantly do something just as important. And I was like, oh, where's that coming from? Like, is that because this came from a very deep need to change it because it happened to me and it wasn't. And then so many people tell me their stories and it wasn't fair, and I felt like I had to do something and I couldn't stop because it came from my story and my belly, like it was mine, you know. Whereas when I was getting this pressure and feeling, which was probably from me more than anyone else, that I had to do something really important next quickly. Even so much so that this is stupid, that when I went on my book tour, which was like 2 weeks after I changed the law, I was like, no, I'm not going to talk about upskirting anymore. I've been talking about it for 3 years, but obviously I've been talking about it privately for 3 years, and I just changed the law and no one knew. So all they wanted to talk about was the campaign. And I was like, no, like, I need to do something different. I need to do something next. Like, I already felt like that a couple of weeks after. And now that I look back, I'm like, that's wild, Gina, because now you've been educating on this law for literally almost 2 years. But the pressure to do something big and what's the next thing, and really took hold of me, and I had to have a word with myself and be like, Gina, where's that coming from? Because that's not coming from your heart and your belly that you desperately want to. And this work has to come from your heart and your belly that you desperately want to. Because A, if it doesn't, you'll give up really quickly because the fire's not there. But secondly, you're probably going to do some harm, because when you come at changing things because you need to be seen to be changing things, it's not authentic. And that's where you do harm, because there's lots of people doing that thing already that are doing it much better than you because it came from them and their experience. So let's have a real conversation with myself and effectively like remove myself. You know, when you're like eating a packet of biscuits and you're like, I'm going to eat the whole packet, or for me it's like 2. So like I'm like, you know what, I'm going to put them in the cupboard so I don't eat the second packet. It was like that. It was like, remove yourself from social media for a bit, just so you don't say, oh, I'm going to do this thing, or I need to find something, or you don't feel this pressure. So I kind of took a bit of time off, not off work at all, but off new campaigns, and was educating on the law, working like with the police, training the police about the law, and like doing all the stuff, and doing lots of stuff on the ground in schools and stuff and talks. And then something came up really organically about a year later, which was a friend of mine called Naomi Nicholas Williams. She wasn't a friend at the time. She was someone I followed on Instagram, and she's a model. She's a black model. She's plus size. And her photos were being removed from Instagram every single time they were put up. This amazing photo shoot she did where she had shorts on and then she was topless and she was holding lavender, and it was art. It was incredible. And her photos were being removed the whole time. And I had contacts at Instagram and stuff because of my campaigning, and I was like, oh, hang on, I could help you here. Like, let's talk about this and let's make this a campaign, because this isn't right. Because we found out that black plus size women were being censored on Instagram at an extortionate rate than white thin women. The Playboy account is up and running with full frontal nudity, but black women weren't allowed to show their bodies in an artistic way because the algorithm was seeing their bodies as unacceptable. It was built into the algorithm. So I started a campaign where basically I was like, or I started a job, I should say, where I was like creative lead for Naomi, and I did what Ryan did for me. And that was a really beautiful experience because I could like give my skills to Naomi. It was about her. I wasn't front and center of it, but I could strategize, right, let's do an open letter here. Let's get these signatures. These people should be involved. Let's talk about this now. Let's have a meeting now and figure it out, you know, the strategy of it. And we changed Instagram nudity policy last year. We changed the wording in that with global Instagram. It's a global change to Instagram generally. And that was a really amazing thing to work on, because it was like, oh, that's what happens. Something comes up and you feel it in your heart, like you care about it, and you're like, that's not right, I want to do something about that. And when you feel that feeling, it's like, okay, now get involved, but don't look for things to change. So since then, I've been like, mostly after I finished that campaign with Naomi, I've just been mostly writing. I've got a new newsletter where we take actions every month. I've been working in schools. I've been working on a second big writing project. I've just become an ambassador for Beyond Equality, which engages men and boys in feminism. So it's like lots of like on the ground stuff, which I really like, because being in the public eye was very, very difficult. I won't be changing any more laws. I don't think I could go into Parliament again without having a slight heart attack. And I also don't know if I think that's the only way to make change. I think that was my work then. And now I feel like I'm trying to prevent things from happening instead of react to them when they do happen.
And it's still deep and meaningful to you, what you're doing now. So you've got that drive and that passion, and it's coming definitely from the right place. So that's great that you've kind of fell into that, if that makes sense. Like you didn't look for it, but it just happened, and it's organic. And I think maybe that's probably the best way for things to happen. You don't want it to feel forced. You do just want to fall into things, and they move in that way for a reason, I think. So yeah, definitely going in the right direction. And so you mentioned in your book that normal everyday people hold the key to change because they understand more than anyone what needs to change. They see it and live it day in, day out. This is a really important message for our iwill ambassadors and champions. The iwill movement is all about young people involved in social action. To build the movement, we're working to put a spotlight on local, neighbourhood level action taken by young people as you advocate for regular people creating change in their communities. What do you think is needed in terms of local level infrastructure to empower more young people to have the confidence and resources to do this successfully?
I want to see way more low-level grants and localized grants for people for social action projects. I want to see money being pumped into. I want to see less hierarchical kind of systems and more resource being given because local people can be trusted with that. Like, I feel like so often someone has to do something or make a name for themselves before we trust them, or we give them a platform and we've given them grants, and it's like local, like normal everyday people are the only thing that have ever changed anything. Like, we have weekends because of regular people. Like, every single thing that we have is because of regular people being like, actually no, or like, oh yeah, no, let's create this because I didn't have that when I was younger, or I didn't have access to that and I don't think that's fair and equal. So I want to see more resources being pumped into communities on a local level, and then just being trusted with the money. Like, I saw this amazing thing from TED where TED I don't think it's actually public, so maybe I shouldn't say. I think it is. Well, it was on Twitter, public, but I don't think it's like a cool thing that people like don't know about. But that's the whole point, where they give money secretly. They have like grants that they are watching kind of all the time. There's a particular subset of TED where they're watching all the time people who are doing stuff in their communities, and that can be literally anything. That can be like campaigns for clean air, that can be community gardens, that can be like agriculture work, that can be food banks, that can be education or teachers, or I don't know, whatever. And they're looking all the time at all this stuff, and they just contact people and just offer them these grants because they've been watching their work, which I thought was such a wonderful way to do it, because instead of having these people have to perform their work, like, you're going to have to come here and give us a presentation and you're going to have to show us why we think that you're valuable, they're just watching people doing the work in their communities, because people are showing powerful people every single day why they're valuable, because they're just doing the work quietly. So TED are kind of watching these people, and then they would give them grants, and what they do with the money is their choice. They don't have to explain to them what they're doing with the money. They just have to go out into their communities and do what they need to do, what they need the money to go into. And I thought that was such a wonderful display of just community and trusting that local people know what's best for their community, because they've been doing that work already for years. So I want to see more accessibility to resources and grants. The reality is that money is really helpful in this work. Activism, organizing, you don't make money. It's not about money. That's not why you do it. You actually spend it most of the time. But to be able to have those extra resources to like scale your project or get more people involved, or, you know, distribute wealth in your community is life-changing. And so much of the glaring structural gaps that the government haven't or don't want to do anything about, they're being plugged by initiatives and charities and grassroots movements who are doing the job that the government should be doing. So I think low-level grants and grants in communities for community action and social action is like what I would love to see, and I would love to see that more accessible. I'd love to be able to say, oh, you can go here, and this is a directory of grants you can apply for, and there's a level of trust in those grants. You don't have to perform your activism to get those grants. You just have to apply, and then they're given to you to do what you need to do in your community. That kind of wealth distribution really changes people's material conditions, and I think like that's what we need. I think awareness is wonderful, and it's part of the kind of arsenal of tools, but so often we have awareness without things that really actually change people's day-to-day lives, and money does that, resources do that, and local people do that really well because they know exactly what the issues are.
Yeah, I think sometimes we at my social action, we rely heavily on funding and grant funding. We don't, because we're not for profit, we don't generate our own income really. And oftentimes you actually have to compete against other community groups to win the money. And it seems, even though you're really happy because you think, oh, I've got this money and I can now do this project and I can, you know, make things better for all these people, you've had to compete against a similar group in the same ward, and they will have also need that money just as much as you do. So you're fighting for this allocation of resources, which it just doesn't seem right that you compete.
It's very against the whole point of organising
to get given the money.
I was just going to say, that sounds like the activism TV show that we're going to start. Did you see that? Wild.
No, where they make you fight for the money.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense.
Not the point.
No. And another thing I was going to say is that there's this belief, I think, sometimes that the local normal people don't have the capability, and they can't. That's why they can't be trusted. When actually they're more than enough equipped. They have the knowledge. They have the power to do it. It's just that they don't have the means. That's why maybe they haven't got as far as they wanted to. So making them compete for those means, it just doesn't seem fair at all. It seems like someone is kind of up there laughing at everyone below, thinking we're going to make all these people fight for this money.
Yeah, that's gross.
It's not what you want to be doing. When you're trying to change things for the better, you don't want to be arguing and fighting about money. It's just not what you want. My last question for today, one last takeaway piece of advice that you wish someone had given to you through your campaign. So a take-home little sentence or phrase for the iwill viewers and watchers today.
Lean on people around you really heavily and look after yourself through all this stuff. Like the media and social mainstream narrative about doing good is like, you know, get up every day and fight and like go and like tear down the system and like you can do it and like smash the patriarchy. And it's like that we need that messaging because it's really helpful, but you also have to remember that you're human. It's going to be really hard when you're fighting for these things because you have to take in information every day. It's difficult. You have to see the reality of these things when you're fighting them. And you're one person. And Ryan used to say to me, like, if you need, because I was a mess during the campaign, and he used to say, take 2 days off and sleep because the law will change 2 days later. Like, this is yours. And when you're in a community of activism, you can take time off because there's other people still doing it. You pick up each other's slack. That's how an ecosystem works. So take care of yourself. It should come like you, the work, and then everything else, you know? Don't martyr yourself for the work because you're better for the movement if you're healthy, you're well, and you're looking after it yourself. The work is better, you're happier, and everything works better if you look after yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And I think maybe we need to start to move away from the notion that constantly grinding and working yourself to death almost it's not going to do as much for progress as having that balance and time to recharge as well. There needs to be a balance. You can't just be going 100 miles an hour all the time. You need to take time to stop because that's not how our bodies work. That's not what we're, built to do. We do need that rest. It's definitely just as important as working hard too.
100%.
So unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. I just want to say a massive thank you to Gina Martin for all your thoughts, honest insights, and just amazing advice for everyone that's watching with the iwill movement today. We hope you've enjoyed listening, and thank you to everyone that tuned in. Do check out the new book, Be the Change, a toolkit for the activist in you, if you've enjoyed today's discussions, because there's much more info in there as well. And where can they find you, Gina, if they want to give you a follow, a like?
You can find me. I'm Gina Martin on Instagram, Gina Martin UK on Twitter, and on Substack, my newsletter is called The Good Chat.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Today's conversation is just one of many events and activities being delivered for this year's iwill Week. Please make sure to visit that website, www.iwill.org.uk, to see the full listing of events, activities, more in conversations, and some extra resources. If you've enjoyed the session today, please tell people about it by sharing it on your social media. Tag iwill movement, hashtag iwill week 2021, Power of Youth, and you can also tag Gina, give Gina a follow as well. So thank you very much for listening. See you later, Gina.
Bye.